necessarily reflect views of CAB Broadcasting LLC and its management or its sponsors.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon and welcome to Voices being brought to you by Radio Zindagi. I'm Renu Dillon from Genius Kids. Always happy to be here with my favorite RJ, Miss Ira, who just decided to disappear off the screen and leave me her logo. Oh, there she is. She's back. Nice to have you back, Miss Ira. Hope you're feeling better. I missed you yesterday. Anyway, great to have you back. And this is our weekly show on Thursdays at 12 o'clock. And before I say anything, I want to also say I became a grandma for the third time on Tuesday. Yay! So for those who haven't become grandparents, you don't even know what you're missing, let me tell you. Anyway, this is our show. This month we're celebrating, and next month we're celebrating all the women who have journeys that they're going to share with us, their journeys of success, their journeys of passion in what they do. And Melinda Gates said, a woman with a voice is by definition a strong woman, but the search to find that voice can be remarkably difficult. I'm sorry, Melinda, I totally disagree with you, because here at Voices, we always happen to find all these remarkable women. And I'm going to introduce the first one to you today, who is going to be sharing her story with us. So thank you, Radio Zindagi, Seba and Neeraj, for giving us this platform. And now let's introduce Masuma Huja. She's a journalist who calls 3 countries her home and reports on people, power, and politics around the world. Her work focuses primarily on women's and girls' lives. She was previously a producer at CNN and a national digital editor at the Washington Post. Welcome to the show, Masuma.
Thank you so much for having me.
I always love to talk to women who are into girl power and women power. That's what I'm all about. So great to have you here. So tell us a little bit about yourself first. We want to know who is behind this pretty face. Where are you based? What do you do? Where did you grow up? Let's learn about you.
Yeah, so I live in London, England, so
My favorite
a little bit
place.
across the world from you guys. And I grew up was born and raised in India and then moved to the States in middle school. So I grew up between countries, came to England for college, and then my life has pretty much been bouncing between places ever since. I'm a journalist, I'm an author, I'm a bookmaker, internet storyteller, where I try to find stories about women and girls around the world and give them a platform, basically.
That's wonderful. Where are you based in England?
I'm in London.
Oh, in London. I grew up in London for many years. So I was on Edgware Road, very close to Hyde Park. So
That's a lovely place.
yes, Miss London. That's wonderful. So tell us about your media venture for girls around the world.
So that has grown out of a few projects that have been a few years in the making. In 2018, I was living out of a suitcase. My life had been moved into storage, and I was reporting on stories of what it is to be a girl in South Asia primarily. I was like bouncing around villages in India. I was in Sri Lanka, and the types of stories we often read about in the news were the stories I was reporting on, stories about child marriage and gender-based violence, and a lot of the important stories of horrors girls face. And I realized very quickly that those weren't the only stories to be told. And the conversations that I was having with girls when we weren't talking about these horrors of their lives, that's what I was interested in. They were telling me about the fights they were having with their parents, which I related to, or the gossiping that was happening with their best friends, or like, oh, this is what I want to do in like 3 years and I don't know how to do it, or this is where I want to go. And none of that ever makes it into news coverage or media coverage. And as a person who had grown up on both sides of the world, that was something very close to my heart, because when I moved across the world, I realized very quickly that people had no idea what people elsewhere lived like. Like, we had headlines and we had the tropes in media. So I remember my first day of school in Pittsburgh, when a kid asked me, how come you're wearing jeans and a t-shirt? You come from India. Like, aren't there elephants on the streets? And, don't you wear like beautiful saris all the time? I was like, no, I've never worn a sari. Like, I'm 11 years old. What do you want from me? And then on the other side, my friends in India, when I would go back, and we went back a lot, and my parents like split their time a lot, they would say things like, oh, your life must be like the OC, right? And I was like, I don't live in California, one, but maybe it's like the OC over there. And also, no, that's not what school is like. Are you joking? So I wanted to capture what real life looked like. So that started with that idea. It became a series for the Lily in the Washington Post, where I had 12 girls from 10 different countries to share diary entries with us. When I finished that, I realized I wasn't done yet. Like, 12 girls is nothing, right? It's just 12 girls. So that grew into a book which came out last month called Girlhood, which is 30 girls from 27 different countries. sharing pieces of their lives with us. So they all shared diary entries. Some of them texted me every night instead of writing diaries. They share photos, and you get a sense of what life looks like day to day for them. When I was done with that, I realized 30 girls is nothing. Like, I'm not done. There's so many more girls out there and so many more stories to tell out there. And I don't want to be the person in between telling the stories. I just want to make space for girls to tell their own stories, which is where this media venture has come into being, where one side of it is going to be storytelling workshops for girls around the world to give them the tools to tell their own stories. And then the other side, it's going to be a platform to actually amplify their voices. So publishing their work and getting it out there so girls, whether they're in Kenya or in India or in Mongolia, can feel seen and understood and see stories like their own out in the world.
That's wonderful. Is your book available, The Girlhood? Is that available on Amazon?
It is available wherever you buy books.
Okay, wonderful. And it's called Girlhood.
Yes.
Okay, that's great. You know, I can definitely relate to what you just said. When I came from Kenya, I'm from Kenya, and I moved here back in the 80s. And I still remember I was we used to own a Subway restaurant, and I was making sandwiches, and somebody asked me, "Where's your accent from?" And I said, "Kenya." And the first thing they said to me is, "How come, do you wear clothes in Kenya, or do you kind of wrap yourselves up with cloth? And do you have elephants in your backyard?" And I was appalled at how they just had no sense of what was beyond the walls of that time, even of just Fremont, forget California, you know. So it's wonderful to hear what you're trying to do. I know you've won the Pulitzer Prize, a Murrow Award, a Webby, and an Epi for your work. And so what do you consider to be your most powerful work? Of course, you know, every author always loves whatever they do, but there's always something that you're passionate about.
I mean, so all of those awards are things that I share with people. And I think the best work that I've gotten to do and the things that I love best are creating spaces for people to tell their own stories. That's what I like to do. And I think that's the work of a journalist, is just like making space for other people. So in some sense, this most recent project, Girlhood, the book, feels like the culmination of lots of things I've been doing for a long time. But across the board, what moves me is when people feel seen by the work I'm creating. So, for example, I did this one project at CNN where I worked, where I sent disposable cameras to women in 20 different countries. And my only requirement was that they were mothers, and asked them to capture what life looked like. And I heard back from people all over saying, you know, I have never seen a family that looks like mine, and I feel really seen by this. Or I mean, I had that too, where I did not grow up in Turkey, and I remember the family in Turkey seeing their photos and being like, this looks like my family. Like, I've never seen a family that looks like my family in media, and I feel seen here. So when I hear back from people and they say they feel seen by the work I'm doing, and they feel like their stories are being represented, like that's what matters to me, and that's what I'm trying to always do.
Wow, that's wonderful. So did you put all that work into, like, you got pictures back? Did you create like a photography book?
No, that one was just an online project for CNN.
Okay, that's wonderful, really wonderful. Your beat is power and politics, and today's social media, where bullying and profiling by organized groups has become a norm. How do you find the strength to tell your stories fearlessly? I mean, we know, you know, there's always so much trolling, and now with social media out of control, people always want to write all kinds of stuff out there and don't spare people like you and myself. How do you manage?
It's awful. Like, that's the truth is that it's awful for all of us out there who are trying to tell stories, and especially for women and women of color. It just gets worse and worse. But the ways in which I try to tell stories are by focusing on human stories, because politics is just how we live our lives, right? The rules that allow us to live our lives. So if I tell you this is how I live in the world, or this is how so and so lives, like this is how they walk to school every morning, and this is what they eat for lunch, you can't really dispute a life. You can have an opinion about an opinion. You can say your opinion is wrong, but you can't say your life is wrong. So I try to focus very much on experiences and just try to drill down on, like, this is what life looks like, because it's so much harder to disagree with someone when you get to know who they are, and you can't really dispute someone's life or their story.
How do you, what's your opinion on, I mean, what happens, since we're talking about India and we're both from India? I mean, there's still, despite the community being so educated, and we still, the respect that women deserve is still not there. what do you think it's going to require to make that change? Do you really think people are going to read these stories and understand? I mean, we continue to have all these rape cases. We continue to have thoughts about, the firstborn should be a son, or, it's just, that's always the attitude. I mean, I witnessed that even here with people. If you ask, a parent, they're having their second child, there'll be a completely different tone when they tell you they're having a son versus a daughter. And what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I'm glad you mentioned that it happens everywhere, because that was going to be the first thing I said, is that like it's not confined just to India, right?
Yes.
It happens literally everywhere. But I think the first step is just like creating spaces for women and girls' stories to exist, because right now narratives everywhere are being created by men, and the stories we tell about our cultures and our worlds determine the laws that are created, the companies that are founded, like how our world works, right? And those decisions aren't being made with women's voices and girls' voices informing them. So it starts by just listening and giving space, creating space, like the things you're doing, right? Like creating space for women's stories to be heard, for girls' stories to be heard, and then we can move forward.
Mm-hmm. But do you see a change? Do you think we're going to see a change? I mean, it's been generations we've been going through this, and still, even now, the weddings are still held with the same silly songs, telling you that you're going to your husband's house and that's where you have to belong forever. I mean, all that nonsense still continues. Do you see this change happening?
I mean, if I look in my family, like across the generations, there has been change, right? Like what it was like for my mother growing up is vastly different from what it's like been like for me as a young woman. Just vastly different from what it was for both my grandmothers, who were, both had children, and even my mother had children at this age. And there were expectations of like you get married and you don't get a job, and like women
Mhm.
don't work. And that's vastly different for me. So our hope is only that change keeps coming through the generations. I don't think like we're going to wake up next year and think the world is so much better and everything is fixed, but I
Right.
think it comes slowly. And the more that, people like you and me speak up and do this work, the better it gets.
Where do we stand today in terms of women's rights, in your opinion?
We need more everywhere. I mean, that's the honest fact, right? Like empowerment is a spectrum where the world is far from perfect anywhere, and we're starting to have important conversations across the world, but we are far from a perfect place. We're far from like equality or parity anywhere. We're far from women having the right to move freely, to exist in the world, to have the rights to choose, to do everything, right? To earn, women don't have to earn the same amount as men. Like it's across the spectrum, and in different places we're at different points in the spectrum, but nowhere in the world is it perfect.
So what's your current project right now that you're doing right now?
I mean, I am building this media venture for girls, and that is my all-consuming thing right now.
So if there's a young girl out there listening to this today or will be tuning in to listen, and she wants to reach out to you and tell her story, how can they connect with you?
So to learn about this venture, go to girlhoodstories.com, and there's contact information out there. Otherwise, my full name, Masuma Huja. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, anywhere you want, basically, and my contact information is widely available.
So it's girlhood.com, right? Or Girlhood Stories.
Girlhoodstories.com.
Girlhoodstories.com. That's great. And what age group of girls are you looking to listen, to hear from?
I have been working primarily with teenage girls into their early 20s.
And any part of the world, anywhere in the world?
Anywhere in the world. I'm running pilot workshops right now, and we've had signups from 20 countries. We have girls from all the way from Manila to Los Angeles who are part of this. So really,
And
all over the
basically
world.
they're right into you, and they you connect with them, and they're going to tell you stories about how they live their daily life.
We're going to give them, so we're running workshops for them where we're teaching them how to tell stories on their own. We're teaching them how to write, how to make audio stories, how to make video stories, social media, all of that, giving them the tools basically to tell their own stories, and then working with them to get those stories out into the world.
And now that you're in London, I mean, on a lighter note, of course, how can I not ask you about Meghan's interview? And what's going on with the Queen and the family and the royal family? Could you maybe share some insight into that?
I actually haven't watched the interview and have not been following all of that beyond the headlines that are crossing my feed. So I don't really know much about it.
So I had to ask you that question. It came from one of our listeners, so I guess I had to ask you that. So as we wrap up, could you tell us what would your message be to all the women and men in the community today? What, what message does Masuma want to know and she wants to achieve? If you could share that in closing.
Create spaces for the girls and young women in your life and listen to them. Don't just say, I want to empower them. I want to like make a better world for them. Here's how I'm going to do it. No, just like take up a little less space, turn to the young people in your life, especially the girls or the young women in your life, and ask them about their lives and what it is to move through the world as them, because they're probably going to tell you things that surprise you of the challenges they face, the obstacles they face, and what life looks like for them.
What has been the most in your stories? What has been something that was a shocker for you that you heard back that you just never knew was happening? If you could share one of those with us.
I don't think there are any shocks I've been doing this for a little bit, so I don't know that there are shocks. I've been surprised constantly at how much I relate to people everywhere and how much we all share in common. Like, I would not necessarily know that I would relate to a girl. For example, there's a girl in my book, Sathagul, she was 16 when she wrote these entries, and she is the daughter of nomadic herders in Mongolia. So her parents move with the seasons. They move every 3 months, which is a lot. And I would think I had nothing in common with her. But that is far from the case, because she goes to school in the city in Ulaanbaatar and she stays in a dorm, and she deals a lot with homesickness, which I relate to very deeply. And I was really surprised. And I found glimpses of myself in pretty much every girl's story. And that is not a thing I would have expected going into this.
Wow, that's wonderful. You know, I could go on and on and on talking to you. It's wonderful. And it's such a great connection. I really want to wish you the very best. It's been such a pleasure having you on our show, and best of luck with all your stories. Maybe I'll write in and tell you some of my childhood stories. And I was growing up in Kenya and then moving to London. But thank you so much. It's really been a pleasure having you.
Thank you for having me.
No problem. And for those who tuned in, that is Masuma Ahuja, and you can find her with childhoodstories.com if you have a story to share, or you know somebody that would like to share her story. She's all about empowering women and girls. So thank you so much. And we're back to Voices. We'll be moving on to our next guest in a few minutes. And for those who just tuned in, this is Voices being brought to you by Radio Zindagi. And this month we are celebrating women and their journeys of success, their journeys of passion, what they love to do, in celebration, of course, of the Women's Month. Although I personally believe we don't need a month to be dedicated to us. We should celebrate ourselves every single day. That's right. So we'll be moving on to our next guest. We have with us, I would love to take the opportunity to introduce a wonderful lady now. We have Sonali Chandra. She's a real estate agent in Los Angeles. She was born and raised in New Jersey to parents from Kolkata, India. Growing up, she learned Indian classical dance and watched Bollywood movies. Well, I can connect to the Bollywood movies, not the dance, of course. And before earning a finance degree from Rutgers University, she made a television debut on the world famous Dr. Phil show, which I can't wait to ask her. And her interview has gone wildly viral on YouTube. Welcome to the show, Sonali.
Thank you for having me, Renu. I'm thrilled to be here.
Well, it's so nice to have you. And you're, of course, as pretty as you were on your video with Dr. Phil. So that's wonderful. So, of course, we want to talk about, I'm all about that a woman doesn't need to have a man in her life to be happy. I think marriage is a great institution if you find the right person. And if you don't, it's great to be single as well. I mean, I'm all about that. So I'd love to know, you're known for being happy as a single lady, and you're probably one of these women out there that don't sit there thinking, when am I going to get married? What's going to happen to me? What's going on? So I want to know about Sonali. Who is Sonali?
Well, Sonali in Hindi means golden, right? So look at me, I'm all dressed in gold. So I live up to my name. Sonali is an ambitious, determined woman, both in her personal life and professional life. She doesn't settle for anything. That means not settling down for any man. And when it comes to her career, I tell people I'm married to my career. So how the hell can I have a boyfriend, huh? I'm very persistent in what I do, and I don't take no for an answer. That's me in a nutshell.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. So if you don't mind me asking that, since we're talking about being single, how old are you?
I am 34 years young.
34 years young. So now if we go back to the old traditional Indian way of thinking, right? At least in my time growing up, as soon as you were done with college, if you didn't have a lineup of dudes to get married to, there was something wrong with you. And you had to be married by at least 24, and you have to have had all those babies by 26 or 27. So how have you managed to survive all of that?
Well, let's just say that, everything you just said, it's so true, but that's tradition. And with all due respect to tradition, it doesn't apply in the modern sense, in the modern world. We're in 2021, and this is the United States of America. Those old Indian ideals just don't work, in my opinion, in my experience. So going back a little bit, so like you said, I was born and raised in America. My parents are from India, and growing up, my parents raised me as if I was in India.
Oh, they did?
Yeah, no dating, no boys, no socializing, no prom, no sleepovers, no dorming in college. I commuted from home. My father at the time told me it would be less expensive, and he was right. I didn't graduate with as high student loans as other people do, but now as an adult, I know that he didn't want me being a naughty girl on campus. So that was pretty much my life up until 22. And then the day I graduated college, when we were driving home after the graduation ceremony, my parents start pressuring me to agree to an arranged marriage. My jaw had dropped. I was shocked. I'm like, you never let me date boys. I had never had a boyfriend up until that point. I'm like, how am I supposed to just get married? It just didn't make any sense to me, although I knew their intentions were good. Again, it just didn't resonate with me.
Right.
So that was at age 22, and now it's been almost 12 years. I've been fighting my parents for over a decade on this matter. Every year that goes by, they're reminding me that I'm not married, and I'm like, look, I'm not going to settle. When the right guy comes along, then we'll discuss it, we'll explore it, but I'm not going to just get married just because I'm a certain age. I'm only 34. I have my whole life ahead of me. Priyanka Chopra didn't get married till she was in her late 30s. I look up to her so much, and she certainly didn't settle. I admire what she has with Nick Jonas so much, and that's what I envision for myself. So I just don't settle. I keep fighting, and thank goodness this is America, the land of the free. Really,
Right.
Otherwise, who knows what would have happened.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I definitely think times have changed. I mean, my story goes back, 34 years ago. And, I think now, even then at that time, I was so against it, but I had to conform with the stereotype. And I really think nowadays parents just have to understand that, women, we have just so much to offer in life. And I don't think everything has to be boiled down to just settling down. So
Right.
how did you get booked on the Dr. Phil show? What happened? We want to know that.
So last summer, or about a year ago, I actually applied for a different reality TV dating show on a big American network. Worked so hard on my self-tape, given we're still in this pandemic, and I crossed my fingers, sent it in. I never heard from them. A couple months had gone by, and then in September 2020, I heard they had cast all the ladies, and I obviously wasn't picked. I was pretty bummed out for a few days. Later that week, I saw a post that the Dr. Phil production team was looking for millennials to help them with their love life. I thought, oh my gosh, this has my name written all over it. So I sent in a short pitch about my story, and I didn't hear from them for a couple of weeks. And then on November 12th, I saw Dr. Phil on the Jimmy Kimmel show. I'm like, I just applied a couple of weeks ago. I haven't heard from them. I wonder what's going on. And then the next day, Friday the 13th in November 2020, they call me. They wanted to book me. They asked me if I was available the next week. I'm like, yep, I'm available. I'm there. So Friday the 13th isn't always bad luck. It can be good luck if you make it. That's the lesson there. And another lesson, when one door closes, another one opens. That has been the story of my life, both personally and professionally. And so, yeah, Dr. Phil, it was great. It was such a liberating and thrilling experience. And, the world goes full circle, right? I grew up watching Oprah. I first discovered Dr. Phil on the Oprah Winfrey Show. And then as an adult, to be on his show, it was unbelievable. It was so
absolutely.
great.
And I think you truly demonstrated that if you want to do something, you have to go after what you want. Persistence is the name of the game.
Right. No one's going to knock on your door and ask you if you're interested. You got to put yourself out there.
I always believe in that. I always believe you can't sit and wait for opportunity to knock on your door. If you see it, you have to go after it. And if it doesn't happen, it's okay. Go after the next one. Right. So how was the experience with Dr. Phil?
Their entire team was so great. They were so respectful of my story. They were fascinated with me. Everything I just shared with you and your audience about growing up Indian American. And then as people will see in the videos, I still have my V card, meaning I'm still a proud virgin. And that is the case with most Indian women, right? Traditionally speaking, up until maybe they get married or if they're, whatever their story is, with all due respect, they were just fascinated by me. And even for me, like, it's not a big deal. It is what it is. It's my life. It's my story. And I will say this, 5 years ago, I never would have thought about going public with my truth. Not that I was ashamed of it, but I just didn't share it with other people. But then about 2 or 3 years ago on the reality TV show, The Bachelor, there was a guy named Colton Underwood. He's this 26-year-old Caucasian guy who claims to be a virgin. I'm watching the show. I'm like, hey, if he can get on the show, maybe I should put myself out there and, brand myself with my truth. I'm an Indian American woman who still has her V card. And I just owned it. I became really proud of it. I started applying left and right to different opportunities. And, it's a numbers game. Anything in life, when it comes to dating or even job search, it's always a numbers game. Everything happens at the right time, and Dr. Phil just worked out.
But, we talk about the V card, but virginity. Don't you think that sometimes we put so much importance on that? And even if you go back to, the old traditions and stuff, it was so important for women to be the virgins, but never the men. Nobody dare ask a guy, are you a virgin? But it was such a critical question that was always asked of women. What's your take on that?
I think it's ridiculous. So much, that's why we have feminism and equality. I'm a huge proponent of women empowerment and women's equality. I think it's uncalled for. Yes. Women, we do so much. Why can't we be held to the same standard, maybe even higher, right, than men? It's a double standard. And when I first learned that as a young adult, my jaw had dropped. I'm like, why is it like that? Men can do whatever. And obviously, if men have promiscuous lifestyles, they're obviously doing it with women. What about those women? Are they not shamed? Like it just makes no sense to me.
Right.
I think it's about time, especially nowadays in America, the land of the free, that whatever it is, what it is, to each their own, especially women, whether you've had no sexual partners, like in my case, or a lot of sexual partners, own it, be proud of it.
Yes.
There's nothing to be ashamed of. And there's
nothing to be ashamed of. Absolutely. Yeah. You just have to stand by what you believe in. So, for all the young girls who are listening in and who want to break the norm and have not been able to, can you tell them, how did you manage to break the norm? I mean, where did you find that courage? You were raised in a family that you mentioned was strict, but yet you found a way to break the norm. Do you still have good relations with your parents and family?
This is sort of a touchy subject. So I mentioned the good part of my childhood, right? You mentioned the Bollywood dancing, the Bollywood stuff, the dancing stuff. I mentioned the no dating, no socializing, all that. So that's the good and the bad. And like anything in life, there's also an ugly component, right?
Correct.
So on the ugly side, I grew up in a home witnessing domestic violence. My parents had an arranged marriage, as do a lot of couples in my parents' generation in India. My father is 9 years older than my mother. They met 2 weeks prior to their legal ceremony, and then they had their religious ceremony, and then they came back to America. My mother didn't go to college. She got married, which was the case with a lot of women back then, right? And just my father was the aggressor. My mother was the survivor, and a lot of physical, emotional, verbal fights. And
correct.
As a girl, growing up in that, it's very traumatic. It's not ideal at all. And I, as a kid, you can't really do anything about it, right? You ask your parents to stop, they don't listen. I was in tears many times, but it had a profound impact on me. I told myself that I'm never going to let a man treat me like that. My father was the breadwinner, and anytime my mother wanted to go shopping, she had to ask my father for permission to spend money, and my father would oftentimes say no because the money had to go to the mortgage or the car payments or put food on the table, which was understandable also. So I just told myself, I'm never going to put myself in that situation. I'm going to own my life. A man is not a financial plan. That's why I studied finance in college. I wanted to control my own money, my own income. And that's pretty much it in a nutshell. For the longest time, I was in denial of all that, especially growing up, right? We don't want to talk about it to outside people. I didn't have a therapist growing up or anything. But at age 29, I finally enrolled in therapy. And that's the first time I started talking about it. And I can't tell you how helpful therapy has been. There's no taboo with it. I think mental health is just as important as physical health. It's all connected. Right. And it's not just Indian people. Domestic violence happens in all cultures, right? And if children grow up in that environment, it certainly has an effect on them. And then if they don't resolve those issues, it's going to carry into their own relationships. And thank goodness for therapy. It helped me process what happened. And for the longest time, I used to be upset at my father. I used to be so mad at him, even though he was the breadwinner and he provided for us. But therapy made me realize that domestic violence is a mental health issue and it's a cultural issue. And he learned it from his parents, unfortunately. And just awareness is so important. And by talking about it, that's how we put an end to it. By just putting it under the rug, it's just going to continue, unfortunately. So,
thank you for sharing your story. I mean, I'm not sure if I should have asked that question, but I'm so appreciative that you were honest enough to be able to share that story and also address the fact that mental health is so important. And I'm not sure why people never want to talk about going to a therapist. I mean, we go to doctors because we feel unwell. You go to a dentist to get your teeth checked. What's wrong with going and talking to somebody about your feelings and your emotions rather than talk to a friend that may give you biased opinions? I just think it's so important.
Definitely. I agree.
So, I mean, I could go on and on and on and on with you. I relate so much to what you're saying. So in closing, what I would love you to be able to give a message out to, first of all, is how can people connect with you? I'm sure there are going to be a lot of young women out there saying, I want to be like Sonali. I want to be able to break out of the norm and I want to be able to proudly talk about who I am and what I am. How can they connect with you?
Of course, folks can find me on Instagram. My handle is I_am_Sonali_Chandra.
Okay.
So that's where folks can find me. I post a lot of inspirational content, and I'm also premiering my vlog this weekend. It's titled How to Be Happy Single Lady Style, and it stems from my personal experiences, and especially with the success of how wildly viral my Dr. Phil interview has gone. I know that people will love it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I thoroughly enjoyed listening to your interview. I really did. And a message to all the listeners today. How would Sonali like to make a difference to all the listeners, including women and men?
Whatever you want in life, whether it's a professional goal, personal goal, pursue it. You only have one life. If you don't pursue it, you're going to regret it. So just go for it. Just do it, like the Nike commercial.
Thank you so much, Sonali. It's been a pleasure. And I know I'm going to be bringing you back on another show for sure, which is about singles and getting married. It's been so nice connecting with you, and you definitely look gorgeous. And if you stay single, great. If you get married, I wish you nothing but happiness. Both ways. I want you to be happy and live your life on your terms.
Agreed. And so should everybody else. Thank you so much. I had a great time being here.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Okay. I'm sure everybody thoroughly enjoyed that interview as much as I did. We've had two very independent, strong women on our show. We had Masuma from childhoodstories.com, and you can connect with her and share your stories with her. And then, of course, we just had Sonali Chandra, and you can find her too. And both women with their own views, their own thoughts, their own journeys of what they believe in, but what do? They're living life on their terms. So now let's move on and introduce our last guest for the show today, who we're going to celebrate, and that's Dr. Anuradha Basu. Welcome to the show, Dr. Basu.
Thank you.
May I call you Anuradha?
You can call me Anuradha, you can call me Anu. Great to be here. Yeah.
Thank you so much. So Dr. Anuradha Basu is a professor of entrepreneurship in the School of Global Innovation Leadership, Lucas College and the Graduate School of Business, and the director of the Silicon Valley Center for Entrepreneurship at San Jose State University. Her research interests include immigrant, minority, and transnational entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship education. She has published articles on Silicon Valley's Indian diaspora entrepreneurs and has advised numerous aspiring entrepreneurs, and is a faculty advisor to the Ideas Club at the San Jose State University. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. Great to be here.
So tell us a little bit about who is Anu? Who is Anuradha? We'd love to know. Where did you grow up? I know you're based here in the Silicon Valley, but tell us a little bit about you and how you grew up.
Right. Well, I grew up in India, in Delhi. My father was in government. Yes. And then I did my first degree, my bachelor's degree in economics from St. Stephen's College in Delhi. And I went on to do an MBA at IIM Calcutta. And then I joined Bank of America in India. I was an account officer with Bank of America. Yeah.
And when did you come here to the Silicon Valley?
And so, in between, so then after that, I quit banking and I became, I did my PhD in economics from Cambridge. and I became an academic. So I switched careers and moved from banking, corporate banking, to academia, and then moved here. I would like to say I was influenced by the, entrepreneurship in the Valley, but actually my husband, who I met at IIM Calcutta, was relocated here. So that's how we moved from England to the Bay Area in 2002.
What made you give up banking to get back into academics? I'm curious.
Great question. I think I was mostly I was influenced by my mom. My mom was an academic. She got her PhD in history from Cambridge, and she was a professor at Delhi University. And so I used to see that she could combine work with, looking after the home, bringing us up. She was always there for us, and yet she was, publishing and teaching and so on. So I kind of felt that was going to be a better work-life balance. I always wanted kids, and I thought that would be the right way to go. So I could, so that was really the reason.
Okay, interesting. And did you have any role models when you were growing up? Anybody in particular, rather than mom? Anybody else?
I think it was really mom. She was amazing. Yeah, so she was definitely my role model.
That's great. Yes, moms can definitely make a huge difference.
Yeah.
So your research is focused on immigration minority entrepreneurs, right? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I got interested. That was my postdoc research. My PhD was in public expenditure decision making, so completely different subject.
Mm-hmm.
How do you make public expenditure decisions? But subsequently in the UK, I got very interested in immigrant entrepreneurs and Indian and South Asian entrepreneurs, and I discovered that the perception of Indians was quite different in England compared to the Bay Area.
Right.
But contrary to the general perception at the time, and I'm talking about the mid 90s, Indians there were a lot of Indian immigrants and South Asian immigrants who had very successful businesses, who were employing a lot of people way beyond their own families, and no one had really written about them. And I also realized separately, I had an idea for starting a new business, and I realized how difficult it is. It's not like it's it's not like a career you take always because of necessity.
Right.
And so that's how I got interested in working on immigrant entrepreneurs in the UK, and then subsequently in the US, where it's quite different.
Well, it's interesting you say that. I grew up in Kenya and then in England. And even in Kenya, after we got independence, it was a lot of Indians that opened up all the businesses, whether it be at hotels or it be grocery stores, or, they were professionals. It didn't matter, hospitals, it didn't matter what it was, and including Uganda as well, which is what, predominantly, again, where a lot of the Indians have gone back now to recover what they had lost many years ago.
So
yes. Oh, I think we've lost her. Let's wait for Anuradha to come back. I think she lost her in the internet connection. For those who are tuning in, as we wait for Anuradha to come back, this is Renu from Voices, and we are, of course, celebrating women of today all over. So if you know of anyone that's doing something remarkable with her journey, then we need to bring her back on our show. And we're going to be running the show, continuing it in April, where we can continue to celebrate women and their journeys of self-success and their journeys, of course, of what they believe in. Hopefully Anuradha will be back. Yes, she'll be back hopefully in a few minutes. That was the internet. For those who don't know, the show happens every Thursdays. Voices is brought to you by Radio Zindagi, and it's a show for the community and by the community. And we actually started this show last year, right when COVID started. Seba felt it was important for the community to have a show where we could address all kinds of different topics, whether it be women, men, issues about COVID, school, regardless of what it was. So if you have a topic you'd like to bring back to Voices, don't forget to reach Radio Zindagi, and we'll be very happy to, of course, bring you on with your guest. Happy to have you back, Anuradha.
I do apologize. I think there's something wrong. My computer is playing up. So.
Oh, no worries. Hopefully you're there. I think I entertained. If you had not come back in another 2 minutes, I'd have had to start talking about Bollywood or something. But thank you for coming back. So yeah, you were talking about the work you were doing. So we were talking about how Indians were, I mean, I think, you know, as a community, and again, we're on the South Asian Radio Network, but I think as a community, Indians have this way of wherever they go, they'll find a place, and whether it's working for a company or opening their own business, we definitely have hard work and persistence in our blood. I think that's definitely in our genes.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah.
Did you discover any other unusual traits you discovered when you were doing your research on Indians and as entrepreneurs?
Well, I found that, you know, in general, they were very highly educated. It didn't matter in England, particularly, it didn't matter whether they owned, you know, grocery stores or, you know, other kinds of non-tech businesses. In America, we all know, especially in Silicon Valley, that, you know, the Indians have a very high level of education, and many are in technology and so on. But in England as well, they were, many had higher education, and they ran sort of multiple businesses. If they had, it was not just one shop, but they had a multiple, you know, many shops, and they were in trading. Many of them, the successful businesses, had links with, the entrepreneurs had links with India or indeed with East Africa. And so they were drawing on their international connections in becoming, you know, in being successful.
Right.
And, yeah, and there were many women entrepreneurs as well, both here as well as in, you know, in England. And that was really interesting too, to see how, you know, the kinds of businesses they were running.
So I'm intrigued to know you are a faculty advisor for the Ideas Club at San Jose State University. Could you maybe share what that is? I've never heard about that.
Okay, so that's an entrepreneurship club. They call it the students, we've named it the Ideas Club, and because it's bringing together ideas from different parts of the university. It's also, you know, design, engineering, art, sciences. So it's bringing together the different schools and disciplines at the university.
And what is your, you know, I've noticed here, especially for the families, everybody's always pushing their kids towards tech, you know, because naturally we're in the Bay Area. But as a parent, I assume you're a parent, right? As a parent, what would your advice be for families? I mean, should they be pushing their children into technical fields, or do you think we live in a country now where our children have so many options? What are your thoughts? Because as Indians, right, again, we always want our children to do even better than what we've done in life, you know, and I can speak even as a parent.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on that?
So I very much believe in pursuing what you love doing. You know, I think that we should not impose our, you know, our views on our kids, and we should let them flourish in terms of, you know, what is it that they love doing? What is it that interests them? And that's what I've done. I have 2 kids, and, you know, I encourage them to do that. I said, you know, choose a subject that interests you. You know, that's the most important thing, because university is the time when you can learn. And if you like what you're learning, then you're going to do well.
Right.
So that's
love what you do. You make money when you love what you do.
Love what you do, exactly. And so that's what I said to my kids. That's what I said to my students. You know, that if you love something, then you'll be motivated. And if you're motivated, you're going to do well. And so
how have you balanced your work and family? That's another thing. You know, the Bay Area is just, everybody leads such a hectic life here. I mean, yes, COVID did slow everybody down for at least somewhat, but we're hopefully returning back to norm now. How, as a mom, have you managed to, you know, balance your life? Any tips for all the moms out there that always feel guilty when they leave their kids back, or they're going to go back to work now? It's going to be tough after COVID. Yes. Leave your kids at daycare or at school and head back to work. How have you managed to balance it?
Well, one is that marry carefully, choose your husband carefully, or your spouse. So,
good one.
And so I have a very, knock on wood, I have a very supportive husband. My children have grown up, but even though my husband had, you know, a pretty hectic career, he was always there to help whenever necessary, and encourage me if I wanted to go off. I remember even when my son was small, I wanted to go to, I was invited to go somewhere else in Europe, and to Prague, and I went to Poland and so on. And he said, go ahead, you know, I look after the, at the time we had just the one son, and he said, I look after him while I was traveling. So, you know, just short trips, but always encouraged me to do so. So that's one. And I think the children as well, when they see that their mom is working and busy and so on, I must say my kids were also very good in terms of, managing on their own, didn't expect their mother to sort of, be there and cooking for them and stuff all the time. So they were quite independent as well.
That's great. And I think it's so important, a lot of parents sometimes don't want to give responsibility back to the children. I think it's so important to give them little chores to do in the house and get them involved, whether they be boys or girls. I think they should both be given the responsibility.
You're absolutely right. And so that's exactly what I did with, both of them. I was always involving them in every decision, even when it came to, cooking or, shopping and so on, And to this day, our daughter is now at home because of the pandemic, but it's so good to have them around and yet be independent,
Absolutely. So where do you think we stand in terms of women's rights, equal pay and opportunities? In your research, have you found that there's, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, as you know, that COVID lockdown has been really terrible for women, particularly for women, for everybody, but for women, both in the workplace and especially because so many of them are having to look after their kids as well as, the home, and then, they can't, and they're frontline workers and often they can't combine everything. So it's been pretty tough on women in general, not just in the United States, but everywhere.
So what do you think in terms of the rights, the equal pay? Do you think we're ever going to get to a situation where women can be making equal, if not more money than than the counterpart?
I do hope so. I mean, but as you know, yesterday was the equal pay day for women. So, they had to work until, March 24th in the United States to earn the same as men in a year. So it's an uphill struggle. I think it also requires women to be more aware, and I think we as women don't negotiate as much as men do, and I think that's extremely important to emphasize and to women that to have the self-confidence to go ahead and to negotiate, and we are often shy of doing that,
Right. And I think definitely even when they go for their job interviews or whatever, and you see a promotion coming up, we just talked about it with the guest earlier, that if you can't wait for opportunity to knock, you just have to go after the opportunity and you have to pursue it.
Exactly. And then not feel that, what is the worst that can happen? The worst that can happen is that you don't get it, right?
Right.
You don't get the job, you don't get the salary increase or whatever, but if you don't ask, if you don't step up, then of course, you won't get it. And I think, so I think that's super important for all women.
And do you have any advice for those who want to leave their jobs and pursue business?
Absolutely.
Sometimes it's a big risk.
It is, of course, it's a big risk, but I think in these days, in today's world, it's become easier because of technology and, there are many resources that we have at our disposal that are free or relatively free.
Right.
And so I think that the advantages of women, and a number of women, as you probably know, have become entrepreneurs in the past 12 months because often because they've lost their jobs out of necessity. But at the same time, it's an opportunity for women because they can, hello?
Yes, I'm here. We can hear you.
Sorry, it's just that my screen is gone. But
we can hear you. We can hear you and we can see you. Yes.
Okay, great. So they can combine, working from home with being an entrepreneur.
Oh, I think we just lost Anuradha again. She's having some technical difficulties with her computer. Anyway, for those who tuned in, this is Voices being brought to you by Radio Zindagi and myself, Renu Dhillon. We're almost wrapping up the end of our show. And today, in summary, our guests were Masuma Huja, the journalist, Sonali Chandra, who, of course, was on the Dr. Phil show. And now we have Dr. Anuradha Basu. Before we lose you again, Anuradha, we have a few minutes left. What's your closing message to all our listeners?
Well, closing message is that, never give up. Try to get a good education because education can carry you a long way. It's a way to, give every woman the power to influence their own life. So I think that's super important. And have a dream. And, if you have a dream, then, you should be able to get to it. So if you have the passion and the persistence and you have the education behind you, then I think anybody can achieve their dream.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure having you on the show, and we wish you the best of luck.
Thank you so much. Apologize for the.
Oh, no, don't worry about it. Thank you so much. And for those who tuned in, we'll be back next week, of course, continuing to celebrate women all over the world. And if you have anyone special you'd like to nominate, don't forget to reach out to Reju Zindagi. This is Miss Renu, and I'm going to leave you with a thought. She was powerful, not because she wasn't scared, but because she went on so strongly despite the fear. On that note, have a great, happy Thursday.